One more quarterback competition in the SEC has been decided. Tennessee has named transfer Joey Aguilar its starting quarterback in the aftermath of Nico Iamaleava's transfer. We will get into that on this edition of SEC Football Unfiltered, our podcast from the USA Today Network. I'm Blake Toppmeyer alongside John Adams. Before we get to the quarterback conversation at Tennessee and beyond, though, quarterback conversation from yesteryear at Auburn. News out of Auburn this week. They are going to be retiring Cam Newton's uniform number after Cam Newton led Auburn to national championship in 2010 with just a truly phenomenal single season performance, which got John and I thinking, what are some of the greatest single season performances we've ever witnessed in college football? Of course, John has many more years of perspective than I have, so we might have a few different names on our list. But before we get to our list, John, your thoughts on Cam Newton and what he was for Auburn in 2010 and now Auburn's decision to retire his number.
Well, he's as good as anybody I've ever seen in one season, one spectacular season. I remember watching him as a backup to Tim Tebow at Florida, and then he just sort of disappears. He goes to JUCO. There's a stolen laptop that figures into the narrative. And he comes back to Auburn, and honestly, as good as he turned out to be, I think 20 teams would have had a shot at a national title. And I'm including Mississippi State in that, which was very much in the hunt for him coming out of junior college. Any one of 20 teams might have won the national championship with him at quarterback. That wasn't an Auburn team as talented as the one in 2004 that went unbeaten under Tommy Tuberville. Unfairly didn't get a chance to play for the national title, but that team had a lot of talent. This one didn't have that talent across the board. It was so much Cam. I remember two plays. One was in the SEC championship game, a blowout against South Carolina. And Cam, at the last play of the half, just flicked his wrist and threw a Hail Mary. Boom, right on the money. Three plays, actually. There was another one where he moved to wide receiver, runs a route. Who was Cody Burns, I think, throwing the ball in the end zone, goes up between two defenders, makes the catch. He looked like he'd been a receiver all his life. And the third one was against LSU, a touchdown run in which he ran right through Patrick Peterson, who is one of the SEC's all-time great defensive backs. Yeah, his season, it was just a cavalcade of highlights the whole year long. I really enjoyed watching him play.
Yeah, and he made a national champion out of Gene Chizik, right? I mean, if we're talking about just Herculean feats, there's one right there. Gene Chizik, whose career, if you subtract the Cam Newton season, was pretty abysmal. He was really bad at Iowa State, somehow was able to parlay 5 victories in Iowa State across 2 seasons into the job at Auburn. And, well, he wins the national championship with Cam Newton, but the rest of his Auburn tenure was very unspectacular, and he was fired just two years after that national championship season, which told you what Auburn thought of Gene Chizik. They thought that national championship was everything to do with Cam Newton and not really very much to do with Gene Chizik, and that was true, right? So if that as much as anything, I think speaks to Cam Newton's greatness in that season was with Gene Chizik as coach. Cam Newton and Auburn won the national championship.
Yeah, and that really when you look back on that championship, a lot of people gave Gus Malzahn, the offensive coordinator, more credit than Gene Chizik for the championship because the offense was so good. On the other hand, how good would that Malzahn-led offense have been if Cam Newton hadn't been the quarterback? And how many offensive coordinators could look pretty awesome with Cam Newton as their quarterback? A lot of gurus out there, if Cam Newton's throwing the ball or running the ball for you.
Yeah, so true, John. If you have a quarterback, you have a chance of national glory, and Cam Newton personified that in that season at Auburn, which made us kind of. We were talking about this off air, John. Just individual seasons of greatness that we've witnessed. Like I said, you've got more perspective on this, dialing back to your years covering General Neyland at Tennessee. I don't know if there were any individual seasons of greatness back during that time that would crack your list, but what are some of them on your list that I don't know if they would rival Cam's season, but would be in that conversation of just an epic 1 year performance? And some of these guys may have had multiple epic seasons, but we're looking for having that truly great one year.
Well, it's after thinking about this, when you told me what the plan was for our podcast, man, it was hard coming. It was hard cutting things down. More names kept popping up because I go way back. I'll go back as far as 1969. I won't go back further than that. I won't go back to the time when dinosaurs roamed the earth.
You were
Uh,
there for that, though, right?
I did see a few of those. The flying ones really got my attention. Yeah,
Ah, yeah.
yeah. Not just not only did they have not only did they have size, they had flying ability. They were sort of a all-purpose creature, kind of like Cam Newton. Okay.
Uh-huh.
So I go back to 1969. I was in college at LSU. Archie Manning with that Ole Miss team. Archie Manning was really ahead of his time. He's 6'3", 205-pound guy that would with almost sprinter-like speed, just this incredible knack for scrambling. And he took an Ole Miss team that was just kind of okay. He really did what Cam Newton did. He just couldn't lift it to the heights that Cam did. But I think back on he cost LSU a chance to play for the national championship. He pretty much beat LSU uh, single-handedly, beat number 8 at LSU, which finished the year with only one loss. Number 6 Georgia, number 3 Tennessee beat it 38-0. Then in the bowl game, beat number 3 Arkansas. It's like several teams had a shot at a national title, but they ran into Archie Manning. And to kind of give you an indication of how good he was and maybe the talent around him, that team also lost to Houston by maybe a couple of touchdowns and lost to Kentucky in a close game. But he had that ability to raise his game when the game was on the line and make everybody else around him better. He didn't win the Heisman, but they wrote a song about him.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I was wondering, John. I mean, you weren't voting for the Heisman back then. I don't
no, I
believe, not
wasn't.
quite yet, but
No,
he finished fourth in the Heisman voting, and we could talk about different Heisman snubs over the years. I know you believe Peyton Manning was snubbed of the Heisman after his phenomenal season in 1997. But in terms of Heisman snubs, not only did Archie not win, finishing fourth, did that really strike a nerve with you? It was Steve Owens, the running back from Oklahoma, who won that year.
well, Steve Owens was an incredible player because I mean, there's never been, you talk about a workhorse, the guy carried, I remember this number sticks out that he might have carried the ball 51 times in a game.
Oh my.
He was one of those traditional I formation tailbacks, lined up deep in the backfield, had a lead blocker as a fullback, and you just pitched in the ball. You knew he was coming, didn't seem to matter. Talk about durable, strong. He just kept knocking out the yards. Not a lot of highlights, but incredible production. So there were other really good players, but yeah, I mean, let's face it, I'm Southern, as you know, Blake, and Archie Manning was unlike anything I'd seen. So yeah, I thought Archie Manning should have won the Heisman, even though that Ole Miss team lost 3 games.
Okay, so Archie Manning's on your list. How about another one for single season greatness that sort of stands the test of time in your memory?
Well, there are a couple. I guess fast forward to Herschel Walker in 1980 as a freshman. uh, at Georgia. A Again, a quintessential I tailback. Only this guy not only was, I don't remember what they listed Herschel at. I think it was 220 pounds, but he was bigger than that. He probably was pushing 240, and he had legitimate track sprinter speed. I mean, I think he ran maybe under 10,200 meters, 10.1 something. He was that fast, and it was that combination that made him pretty much unstoppable. I covered that Georgia team when it won the national championship against Notre Dame in the Sugar Bowl. I mean, he did that in his first year. He just took over a game, and what stood out to him was there wasn't a lot of decoy going on. Uh, on fourth and short or third and short, or when you're on the goal line, Georgia handed the ball to Herschel. And there was no mystery. Georgia would hand the ball to Herschel, but he was just so big and strong and fast. Nobody could stop him. He just shedded tacklers and got in the end zone. So, yeah, he's, in terms of a college running back, been so many great ones that achieved more success than Herschel did at the NFL uh, level. But I thought Jim Brown was the greatest running back I ever saw. But Herschel, no running back ever dominated the college scene the way he did. So he's the next one that comes to mind. And then one more, which probably preceded your viewing, would have been Barry Sanders at Oklahoma State.
I loved Barry in the NFL. Was one of
Yes,
my favorite NFL players ever. But yeah, I don't have the perspective on that phenomenal season. He rushed for over 2,600 yards that year, didn't he?
2,628 yards and 37 touchdowns.
Jeez.
I mean, that team lost 2 games to Nebraska and Oklahoma. The quarterback, Mike Gundy, uh,
Hmm.
and he had a really good offensive line. It wasn't all Barry Sanders, but as I remember, they had a bunch of returning starters, a senior dominated offensive line, and I can just still remember him running in the open field. He was durable too. I mean, he was a highlight waiting to happen, and had, as you learned in the NFL, he had the ability to just bend that ankle like most players would have come away from the play with a broken ankle, and he came away from it with a touchdown. He just strengthened himself, pulled himself up with those sharp, devastating changes in directions, and just wouldn't go down. So, yeah, he just really stands out in terms of pure production and highlights. And I think he averaged, I don't know, I didn't write it down, but it
I got it
seemed
pulled up here, John. He rushed for over 2,600 yards. His
uh-huh.
yards per game average, though, how about this? 239 rushing yards per game.
And
That's just
and
insane.
what?
239 yards per game with 37 rushing touchdowns. Just unbelievable.
Yeah, and see, I kind of go back to, and what was his yards per carry? I thought that was really significant too.
Yards per carry, 7.6 yards per carry.
Wow.
I mean, that's three-quarters of a way to a first down every time he runs the ball.
And, and again, like Herschel, there's no mystery with who's getting the ball. And it didn't matter down and distance. With that Oklahoma State team, you just hand the ball to him, got behind that proficient offensive line, got out of the way. And so who knows if it's 3rd and 17, he might gain you 18.
Yeah.
So yeah, just gosh, he was, and I imagined, I couldn't help but think about this when I was watching him play in the late '80s. What if he'd have been on that Oklahoma team in the early '70s when it ran the wishbone?
Mm.
I mean, he would have been perfect as that pitch man on the wishbone for
Might have rushed
Oklahoma.
for 3,600 yards.
Yeah, he might have never been tackled.
Well, while we're on the topic of running back, those are two good ones, John. I wondered if you would go in the direction of Herschel Walker and Barry Sanders. So I'm glad you brought those seasons up. from the 80s. But before we get to a couple more, I'm going to interject a couple here since we're on the theme of running backs, and these two might have been on your list as well. But taking us into the 90s now, Ricky Williams' season in 1998 at Texas, where much like some of the guys you were talking about, there wasn't always a ton of mystery with what Texas was going to do that season. That was a good but not great Texas team. Ricky Williams ran it almost 400 times that year, rushed for over 2,300 yards, and was just became the definition of a bell cow tailback. So that 98 season from Ricky Williams stands out to me. And then on the theme of running backs for single season greatness, before I'm sure we'll have some quarterbacks here to mention as well. But another running back I'd mention would be the Reggie Bush season from 2005. He wasn't the workhorse in the way that Ricky Williams and Barry Sanders were, because every time he touched the ball, it was like a big play waiting to happen. So he didn't have the total carries, but rushed for over 1,700 yards, averaged almost 9 yards per carry. That's just phenomenal. Just hard to even think about. It boggles the mind. And he was a good pass catcher out of the backfield too. So as far as running backs go, I'd have those two on my list, and Ricky Williams for 98 and Reggie Bush at Southern Cal from 2005.
I thought Ricky Williams was a great running back. I watched a lot of him in Texas, but the three guys that stood out to me were Herschel, Barry Sanders, and then Reggie Bush, because they just did things that just extraordinary things. They had both the production, the durability, and that unbelievable quality, being able to make highlight plays at any given time. I still remember the 05 national championship game was actually played in 06, of course, but against Texas, best game I've ever covered. But there was a play where Reggie Bush is running straight for the sideline, and I've never seen a running back cut like he did. How his momentum didn't carry him out of bounds, I just couldn't imagine. But he made that just 90-degree turn, and the next thing you know, he's going airborne. He was quite the long jumper, and he's in the end zone. And the other thing, you might have watched this game too, was against Fresno State, when Southern Cal was on the ropes. And I think it was that same year. It was on the ropes. Fresno State,
really high scoring game. If memory
it was
serves.
like a 17-0 lead.
Yeah.
And Reggie Bush just took over the game. He's the big reason why. I know Matt Leinart was a terrific college quarterback, but Reggie Bush was just the X factor. You mentioned he caught the ball. They'd split him out as a receiver, not just coming out of the backfield, but split him far out and let him go make a play. He could do that. He could make tough yards. He could hurdle the line. Whatever you ask of him, he could deliver. I don't remember his throwing a pass, but he probably could
in
have.
special teams, he was a return man. Pretty good kick returner, punt returner. I mean, he really did it all.
Yeah, in that game against Fresno State, I think the comeback started with Reggie Bush being surrounded by defenders. And as good as he was, kind of like, the odds stacked against him didn't seem to matter.
Well, okay, I'll throw a couple quarterbacks out there, John, and you help me out and see if I'm missing anybody. But three more that stand out to me for single season greatness, all SEC quarterbacks here would be Johnny Manziel at Texas A&M. Their first season in the SEC, he was a redshirt freshman. 2012 was he became Johnny Football. It was phenomenal. Tim Tebow in 2007. It's interesting, that was not the year that Florida won the national championship, but Florida didn't have a particularly good defense that year. Florida was a bit of a flawed team. They went 9-4. Tebow did it all: run, pass, bulldoze, everything. Won the Heisman Trophy that year in 2007. And then Joe Burrow in 2019. That one, boy, if I'm picking one season for individual greatness, Burrow is definitely on my short list. What he did in 2019, I know he had a lot of talent around him, but he was the maestro of that attack. And we talk about players making their coaches look good. And Joe Burrow made a national championship coach of Ed Ogeron, and we both think the world of Eddie O. But I think you get my drift there of why that was so special. So those are three more that jump out to me. You agree? And are there any more I'm missing or overlooking maybe?
Oh yeah, I agree with all those guys. And Tim Tebow. I mean, I just had so much fun watching those guys play. And to me, is Burrow was so good, but he produced the yards, but not as many highlights
Mm-hmm.
as Tebow did and Manziel did, because they had less talent around them. I mean, Joe Burrow was throwing to two future Hall of Fame, not college, NFL wide receiver, and Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. Uh, so I go back, I think back in that Tebow season, man, he really should have won two Heismans. I thought he should have won it in '08. Sam Bradford won it. But Tebow willed that team to a championship. And in '06, he helped Florida win a championship. But in that '07 season, man, he was doing everything. I can still see him in the open field just shrugging off tacklers. And again, like go back to Herschel Walker and Barry Sanders, even though he was a quarterback, you knew he would get the ball.
Mm-hmm.
And in short yardage, here he comes. I mean, he was Herschel Walker playing quarterback in a way, not the speed, but the strength. Man, he was so much fun to watch in that 017, even because I think one thing we really value is when a player might not have the best team around him. He might have a good team, a pretty good team, but when he achieves this kind of greatness, and rather than the team lifting him up, he lifts up the team. And those guys certainly did that. I guess another quarterback that I put in that category, and I mentioned the game earlier because he led Texas to the national championship, was Vince Young. I've never seen a player dominate a game the way he did a national championship game against Southern Cal. That was an incredibly talented USC team going for 3 straight national titles. And Vince Young just he wouldn't let USC have it. He just kept, I mean, he made those guys look like a bad team, a defense that had quite a few future NFL players on it, made them look really helpless almost. Uh, and he had great numbers. He passed for over 3,000 yards and rushed for over 1,000 in that '05 season. And here's the stat that really stuck out to me: a 6.8 yard rushing average for a quarterback who throws the ball, not an option quarterback, a thrower. So he's going to get sacked some. That's taken away from his yardage and certainly his per carry average. But yeah, so I put him in there. I mean, when you think back, man, we had a great run of quarterbacks in that era.
Yeah, I think so. It really, I mean, I guess you could say it started with Vince Young in a way. I mean, Matt Leinart and USC was pumping out good quarterbacks year after year as well, and then Tebow comes in as a true freshman, plays, and the rest is history there with maybe an unmatched career. If we're just talking about greatest college careers, I think Tim Tebow is near the start of that conversation. But I think there's a pretty good list there. I'm sure our listeners will point out somebody that we missed for individual season of greatness. Ndamukong Suh was a one-man wrecking crew at Nebraska there in 2009. He's kind of an honorable mention, I guess, on my list. But yeah, I think that's a pretty good list there of single season greatness, and certainly Cam Newton belongs on that list, and fittingly getting his number retired at Auburn. All right, let's pivot, John, to present day quarterbacks. The news in recent days at Tennessee. You predicted this last week on the podcast when we touched on the few unsettled quarterback conversations in the SEC. You predicted it would be Joey Aguilar, the transfer, to win the job. He has won the job. Joey Aguilar, kind of a twisting journey to this QB1 role at Tennessee. Previously was a starter at Appalachian State, transfers to UCLA in hopes of becoming the starting quarterback there. UCLA then brings in Nico Iamaleava, the Tennessee quarterback, in April. And so Joey Aguilar sees the writing on the wall at UCLA and kind of is the player to be named later, so to speak, in that transfer deal. And Tennessee takes him in to be its starter. Josh Heupel has an excellent history of developing quarterbacks. You mentioned earlier Sam Bradford in 2008. Josh Heupel, quarterbacks coach on that Oklahoma team, helped develop Sam Bradford on down the line as a coordinator in the SEC. Then develops Drew Lock going forward at Tennessee. Hendon Hooker becomes a great success story for Josh Heupel, and there were many others that he showed a deft touch with as well. But this, John, I think would be really the ultimate feat. I think taking a guy who arrives in the summer, has to learn a new system, is basically coming from the group of five, because he goes to UCLA for a cup of coffee, but he was in and out. So let's call it what it is. He's a group of five transfer who's had some success, but also threw a lot of interceptions at App State, and he's learning a new system at warp speed. What do you think of the chances for Josh Heupel and Tennessee to make something good out of Joey Aguilar?
Well, I think as a columnist, we always pull for the best story. And I think if he has success, it will be one of the best stories in college football, not just the SEC. Because here's a guy that nobody wanted. He goes to some far-flung junior college that I'd never heard of, Diablo Valley or something like that.
Sounds like a made up out of a made-for-TV film.
Yeah, like an old Western movie. Diablo Valley Gunslinger, starring Joey Aguilar. And then he goes to, you can get lost in the Sun Belt at Appalachian State. Appalachian State has had some good teams. Everybody remembers the upset of Michigan. But his last season there, he wasn't on a good team. It was a 5-6 team. I mean, I've watched video of him. He's got a nice, he looks accurate on the deep ball. He's got a pretty strong arm, a very strong arm. He looks comfortable back there, but I'm watching Sunbelt. It's kind of like watching a guy is a high school senior. And, I thought Jared Garantano was going to be the next Cam Newton. Didn't work out that way, but he sure looked pretty good playing high school ball in New Jersey. So still, Joey Aguilar, I like the fact that he's durable. He didn't get hurt there, and he learned how to play under duress. Yeah, he threw 14 interceptions last season for a 5-6 team that was often way behind on the scoreboard. Clemson beat Appalachian State 66-20. South Alabama beat it by 30-something points. So he encountered adversity and learned to play under adverse circumstances. I think that's important. A quarterback that we don't list on our all-time great college quarterbacks are just, one-season superstars is Josh Allen, who played at Wyoming. In his first season as a starter there back in 2016, he threw 15 interceptions. He wasn't playing on great teams there. And so he learned how to play. I think he was 9 out of 24 for 64 yards against Oregon in a 49-13 loss. My point being, I'm not saying Aguilar is the next Josh Allen. I think there's so many factors that impact how a quarterback plays and impacts his stats. So to me, Aguilar is kind of a blank slate. We don't know, but there are possibilities for him, just like there were possibilities for Diego Pavia when he transferred from New Mexico State to Vanderbilt, and a Vanderbilt team picked to finish last in the SEC, as it customarily has been picked. Ended up beating Alabama and winning 7 games, including a bowl game. So, yeah,
What's the ceiling, do you think, for Tennessee, John? Because I look at the schedule and it's I guess I would call it accommodating. I mean, by the SEC standards, I think it's somewhat accommodating. There are 4 teams ranked in the preseason top 25 on the schedule. They get Georgia at home, they get Oklahoma at home, and then toughest road games will be at Alabama, at Florida. You could say if you split those 4 games, go 10-2 and be back in the playoff. That's probably the rosiest outlook possible for a team that had this late quarterback switch and had to replace some star power off of its team that made the playoff last year. But Josh Heupel has proven throughout the course of his career he is a high floor coach. He steers clear of disastrous seasons, and Tennessee fans should not take that for granted because they endured plenty of disastrous seasons in between Philip Fulmer and Josh Heupel. So we know he's a high floor coach, but I'm wondering about the ceiling for this team, given all that it had already lost off its playoff roster, and then having to deal with this 11th hour quarterback change.
Yeah, I look at Tennessee. I look at particularly its offense. I think this could be a pretty good defense again, just like last year's. I think it could be a very good defense. That defense is loaded with 4-star players, particularly in the defensive front. So there's really good potential there. I love the schedule. I don't know that Tennessee will ever see a more accommodating schedule in a 16-team SEC. It plays the 4 worst teams in the league. I think most people would agree with that. Arkansas, Mississippi State, Vanderbilt, and Kentucky. Not that they can't beat you. Kentucky proved that against Ole Miss last year, but I just see that as a very accommodating schedule. And the non-conference schedule is pretty much a breeze. And Syracuse 10-3 last year. This Syracuse team won't remind anyone of that team.
They have a new
Heavy
quarterback as well. It's Steve
Yes,
Angeli, the former Notre Dame backup, will be starting at Syracuse.
yes, and Tennessee took Joey Aguilar over uh, Angeli. In fact, they were both in the portal at the same time, and they went into the portal after spring ball. So, uh, yeah, I look at all that, and it's not just whom Tennessee plays, but when it plays them. You got Georgia in September, Alabama in October. And those are 2 games in which Tennessee will be an underdog. I don't think an overwhelming one, but you say, okay, you lose those 2, but you still go into November with only 2 losses. I think that's very realistic. And you got Oklahoma and Florida, 2 teams that play the 2 toughest schedules in the SEC, who are very, very dependent on outstanding quarterbacks. John Mateer transfers from Washington State at Oklahoma, and of course DJ Lagway, who's had a history of injuries at Florida. Late in the year, who knows what kind of shape those guys will be in. So I guess my point is that I look at this Tennessee team and I don't see a playoff team, but then I say, well, wait a minute. If things break their way and Aguilar proves to be a pretty good quarterback, it could be very much there near the end of the season against Florida in Gainesville could be right where Ole Miss was last year when it went to Gainesville and then lost its hope of a playoff bid with the defeat. So, yeah, it's this season it's hard to it's really hard to project how teams will do. We talked about this before. When you look at the talent of the depth chart and then you look at that schedule, and you need a combination of the 2, I think, to make the playoffs.
With Aguilar being named starter at Tennessee, John, that leaves basically 1 quarterback competition undeclared. As we record this on Monday afternoon, Missouri has not called its election. I believe Bo Perbula, the transfer, the former Penn State backup, I would think he's the favorite to be the starter. They also have Sam Horn in that competition, who was selected in the MLB draft professional baseball is probably his eventual future, but he stayed at Missouri to play this season in football, which whether he wins the job or not, it was important for Missouri that he stayed because they need a backup if it is Perbula. So they haven't declared a starter, but I would think Bo Perbula, the transfer from Penn State, is the front runner there. He was a situational player at Penn State last year. We know he's a good runner. Not sure how he's going to be down to down as a pocket passer, but haven't seen much of Sam Horn throughout his career. He had Tommy John surgery earlier in his career. What we have seen of him didn't strike me as a guy that maybe is going to be a starting SEC quarterback. So I think it'll probably be Perbula there. But elsewhere, we know the crop of starting quarterbacks in the SEC. There's some big names at the top, none bigger than Archie Manning, of course, but proven guys as well. And Garrett Nussmeier, LSU, guys that broke out last year were Lenore Sellers, South Carolina, and DJ Lagway at Florida. Overall, John, what do you think about this collection of quarterback talent in the SEC?
Well, I think it's got a tremendous upside. I think this could be a great quarterback class. Arch Manning, you mentioned, Garrett Nussmeier, Lenore Sellers at South Carolina, tremendous player. DJ Lagway, if he can stay healthy. Man, 4 quarterbacks that are that good in the SEC. That's a really strong group, and I think we both agree. We both like Garrett Nussmeier a lot, and so Arch Manning certainly. So those to me are 2 of the leading candidates for the Heisman Trophy. I think what's interesting about this is you have 2 of the best programs, Alabama and Georgia, who don't have that kind of quarterback. Imagine if Garrett Nussmeier was a quarterback at Alabama and Kalen DeBoer's system. I mean, I think I'd have Alabama number 1 in the country in preseason, or if you put him at Texas, that kind of player. Or what if you put Lenore Sellers, took him away from South Carolina, took him over to Athens, Georgia, and
My.
huh?
Whew. Yeah, I'd be penciling Georgia in as my national champions if they could bring in Lenore Sellers. It really is I mean, I don't think we can say for certain that Alabama and Georgia are painted into a corner at quarterback. It's unknown. They don't have the sure thing that we feel like we see at some of these other schools we're talking about. I mean, Ty Simpson, he's thrown 50 passes in his career as a career-long backup. We know what he was in the recruiting circuit. He was a 5-star. That's great, but I'm much more interested in what you are at this point in your career as a college quarterback. And there's not a ton of sample size there. Doesn't mean he's going to be a massive bust, but it's more of a risk than what we're talking about at some of these other places. Gunnar Stockton, similar type situation. I think Gunnar Stockton's got a pretty good arm. He may not have Carson Beck's arm, but I think he's got a good arm. He can run, make plays with his feet. We saw that in the SEC championship game, but again, limited sample size, and Kirby Smart made the decision last year that Carson Beck was the better of quarterback of the 2, and that was with Carson Beck not playing at the level he did the year before. So, yeah, it's a gamble at those 2 schools, and I think at some other schools it's less of a gamble. But then you look at all that other talent at Georgia and Alabama, and you think, well, they got some pretty enviable guys, talent at other positions, but they have to get the quarterback right. I mean, what would we start this podcast talking about? What Cam Newton meant to Auburn. It is just difficult, and that was 15 years ago. But now, 15 years later, it is difficult in this day and age, particularly with a 4-round playoff. You got to survive a minimum of 3 and up to 4 playoff games. Trying to do that with an average quarterback, that just is far-fetched, I think. So if Alabama and Georgia are going to get serious in the national championship mix, they don't necessarily need Ty Simpson and Gunnar Stockton to be Cam Newton, but they have to become pretty good quarterbacks.
I think who they have to become is Stetson Bennett. Stetson Bennett at Georgia, 21, 22 national championship teams. Where was he drafted? Was he a fourth round pick of the Rams?
Well, I don't even know
Third
if
or
it was that
fourth
early.
round pick?
Yeah.
I think it was fourth round
Was it
pick.
fourth round? Okay.
I'm just guessing, but he wasn't listed among the surefire NFL quarterbacks, and he had some off the field issues that has certainly factored into how he's developed. We won't go into those things, but he was a really good quarterback in college, and what he was able to do. You talk about the playoffs. You want to win a national championship, you have to have a quarterback can raise his level of play and maybe the teams as well in one of these playoff games. And that's what Stetson Bennett did. That drive against Ohio State,
Mm-hmm.
that was one of the real clutch, epic SEC performances, I thought, because that was a really good Ohio State team. That's what you got to have. And I think it helps to be a dual threat guy. He just had that knack for escaping pressure. And I don't know if Gunnar Stockton has that knack. He has running ability. That's the question I have with him. Is he shifty enough? He's sturdy. I think he can handle contact and he can make yards. But can he make those quick cuts, quick turns in a passing pocket, break out of the pocket and maybe get you 12 yards and a first down? I don't know. Maybe he can. I guess when I look at this quarterback crop in the SEC, I see all these guys at the top who look like first round picks. We brought, we named four.
Yeah.
And then I look below that, and a guy we haven't mentioned that I really like is Talon Green at Arkansas. 6'6" guy who can run. Had a pretty good year with the Razorbacks on a bad team. I guess there's a chance that there won't be any SEC teams that are quarterback poor this year. There's at least
Mm-hmm.
you've got potential. Kentucky, even Zach Calzada, who's been kicking around college football forever.
He's been playing college football as long as you've been writing about college football, John. It really feels that way. You might have covered
Yeah,
Calzada's true freshman season back in the mid 1970s when you were getting your career
yeah,
humming.
no, yeah, that 77 Sugar Bowl with Zach Calzada quarterbacking Alabama. Oh no, it wasn't. It wasn't Calzada. He was good. Though he was good enough to beat Alabama when he was at A&M. He did what Johnny Manziel did. Nobody really thought of him as you know, a really great quarterback. Very average on his best day, but on his best day, he did beat Alabama. So is it?
Yeah, and under the heading, John, unless you had more you wanted to say about Zach Calzada,
I
figured we'd
know
run through.
I'm gone on too long. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, pulling us back in another direction. Under the heading of if you have a quarterback, you have a chance. I think one of the most interesting teams, not just in the SEC, but college football this year is Oklahoma, right? Because they bring in John Mateer, who was very, very good last year at Washington State. Now he's going to have a different caliber of competition, not just playing in the SEC, but you look at Oklahoma's schedule, and that's not even by the SEC standards, that they got a tough draw there. It's one of the nation's toughest schedules, just loaded with ranked opponents. But because of the schedule, I could see it going bust for Oklahoma. But because they bring in John Mateer and some other talented players around him in the portal, but they had to get better at quarterback. I know there were some contributing factors to Jackson Arnold last year not playing up to his recruiting billing, but also they had to get better at quarterback. And John Mateer offers the possibility, I think, of that happening. And in a game, to me, a September game that I really feel like is kind of flying below the radar is that week 2 game for Oklahoma, home game against Michigan. I think that's going to be very revealing for both teams because you have Michigan. They're going to have a different look at quarterback this year. Could it be the true freshman, Bryce Underwood, number 1 ranked recruit, 5-star? I think very well could be him. I think that game will give us some insight into Michigan, Are they a playoff contender or are they a pretender? Michigan's schedule, very accommodating. Just two teams, I believe, on Michigan's schedule ranked in the preseason top 25. That's Oklahoma and Ohio State. Otherwise, pretty good draw for Michigan. So I think it's going to be a revealing game for Michigan, but also about Oklahoma. Oklahoma's got, a week one gimme game. They got Illinois State out of the FCS in week one. But that week two game, that to me tells, much like Michigan, tells me, is Oklahoma a playoff contender or are they a pretender? If you can't beat Michigan at home with what's left on this schedule, I don't think Oklahoma's a playoff team. You beat Michigan at home, you're 2-0, get Temple the following week, so you're probably 3-0 with a win against Michigan in your back pocket, and you know you're going to have the strength of schedule in your back pocket. At that point, I think Oklahoma starts looking like a playoff contender and not a pretender.
Last year, we remember it for the way it played out for those 3-loss SEC teams being stopped at the gates, the playoff gates, and no, you're not good enough. 3 losses, couldn't overcome 3 losses. Oklahoma could be the SEC team that would overcome 3 losses, particularly if it beats Michigan and Michigan has a good season. And then it loses 3 SEC games because the schedule is so intense, so laden with nationally ranked teams. You go through that schedule, 9-3, and I don't know if the selection committee members give you any credit for something like scheduling a game with Michigan when you've got one of the toughest schedules in the country, just within the boundaries of your conference. Gosh, that to me, a 9-3 Oklahoma team could get in the playoffs.
Yeah, I agree. If there was going to be a 9-3 team in the playoff this year, and we don't know how everything's going to unfold, but just projecting forward, looking at what teams' strength of schedule realistically could be, I think a 9-3 Oklahoma team would be about as appealing as you could build a resume at 9-3. I mean, the schedule includes Michigan, number 1 Texas, South Carolina, top 15 team, Ole Miss, top 15 team as far as the coaches poll goes. Tennessee, another ranked team. Alabama, top 10 team. LSU, top 10 team. I mean, there's not very many weak links in there, John. Even the unranked teams. You got Auburn, who we both think is going to be better this year. You have Missouri. If Bo Pribula winds up being a pretty decent quarterback, I don't think Missouri's a layup game. They've won 21 games the past 2 seasons. You'd be smart not to overlook Missouri. They got your boys from Kent State on the schedule. I guess there's your layup game, John. But but inside conference play, and then you add in that game against Michigan. I mean, there's 9 testers on the schedule for Oklahoma. Can you go 6-3 against those 9? Maybe. If they do, I think you're right. That could be a 9-3 team worth a long look from the playoff committee.
Yeah, and I like the other side of that early season matchup with Michigan, because it does have a more appealing schedule. And when you look at the Big Ten, you think about Penn State, defending national champion Ohio State, that right there at the top. I mean, both of those are deemed national championship contenders. Penn State's got everything back. Well, we know what Ohio State is. And then Oregon. Yeah, it hadn't won anything, but it's talented. And then after that, Michigan is kind of an afterthought. But when you think about Michigan football, heck, Michigan football could beat Ohio State. It beat that Ohio State team last year, a team that in playoffs nobody could handle. And so it has potential. And just think, if Michigan, ideal scenario for Michigan, beat an SEC team on its home field, then pull for that SEC team, Oklahoma, to have a good year. Think back to last year, Notre Dame playing at College Station against Texas A&M. which was looking pretty good for a long time. It faded down the stretch, but what was it, 8-4 regular season, something like that, I guess.
Yeah, that's right.
A&M, and so you see, that was something that helped Notre Dame. There's no doubt about it. That win helped Notre Dame, winning in a very hostile environment. If Michigan can do the same thing, and just kind of win the games it's supposed to win in the Big Ten, it's a playoff contender.
All right, let me workshop one theory here on our way out the door, John. The week one, we'll talk about it more next week because it will be week one. But the big clash, Texas at defending national champion Ohio State. All eyes will be on Arch Manning, rightfully so. He's got the surname. He's got the #1 ranking. We'll all be very, very interested to see how Arch Manning looks against a great opponent in Ohio State. My theory, though, is that this game and how Julian Sayin, the new starting quarterback at Ohio State, performs, who we really haven't seen much of. He redshirted last year, played sparingly, so he could use that as a redshirt year. We've seen much more of Arch Manning than we have of Julian Sayin. So my theory is, for all the attention on Arch Manning and #1 Texas, I think that this season opener is going to be much more revealing about Ohio State than it will be about Texas, because I feel like, I know the sample size isn't huge for Arch Manning, but I believe he's going to be a very good quarterback this season. Julian Sayin, I mean, his recruiting ranking suggests that he is. Everything you hear about the guy suggests that he is, but we really haven't seen any of him at all. So that's my theory, is that for all the attention on Arch in week one, this is going to be a much more revealing test case for Julian Sayin and Ohio State.
I agree. And you talk about pressure being on Texas because it's the #1 team and it's playing at Ohio State, defending national champion. You just don't go in there and win very often. So there's a lot of pressure, all the publicity Arch Manning has gotten. But I think there's more pressure on Ohio State because of its quarterback situation. We still don't know what he can do. And if he does really well and Ohio State wins, I mean, Ohio State looks like a real strong candidate to repeat, but we don't know how he'll handle that situation. I think Arch Manning will handle it very well. And I can't ignore the Manning history. I just can't. I mean, Peyton, Eli, Archie, all those Mannings, they usually excel in big games. Peyton couldn't beat Florida. I realize that, but Florida was, most teams couldn't beat Florida back then. And he didn't play badly in all those games. So I just think there's a track record there. He's prepared for this very moment, as well prepared as you could be for someone who hasn't played any more than he has. And I think he'll be better than Quinn Ewers. I like Texas's chances against Ohio State with Arch Manning in this game than I did Quinn Ewers' chances last year against Ohio State.
So if you could bring Quinn Ewers back for a curtain call, so to speak, and have him starting in week one, or you could have Arch Manning starting, you think you'd take Arch?
In a heartbeat.
In a heartbeat. All right. Well, we started talking about Archie Manning's season, John, and how that stands out as one of your greatest seasons of all time. Maybe by the end of the season, we'll be talking about Arch Manning. What we will be talking about next week, John and I are going to kind of do a unique take on our playoff picks. John's going to get 6 picks. I'm going to get 6 picks, and we're going to put our heads together to come up with a 12-team playoff while still following the rules of having a minimum of 5 conferences represented. So that's on the docket for next week. In the meantime, as always, if you like what you hear on the podcast, would appreciate it if you can give us a rating or review. Those ratings and reviews help us get in front of more listeners. And also, we've got our SEC Unfiltered newsletter linked in the podcast description. John and I write for that newsletter each and every week. We got some other writers as well in that newsletter from around the USA Today network that's delivered to your inbox free, no charge for that newsletter. For subscribers, non-subscribers, you get that free if you sign up for the newsletter that's linked in the podcast description, and you'll get that emailed to you in your inbox 5 days a week. Thanks for listening to this edition of SEC Football Unfiltered. We'll be back with you next week.